Hello.
There we are.
Nice that it worked.
My best friend in high school was from Halle and La Salle. How is it there?
Yeah, it's great. We work here with Werk Lights. They have invited us. It's a great institution. They run a great festival, which was now, of course, cancelled. But yeah, but still, we're having a good time, and it's great people here.
We try to alcohol detox here, as we had been at our host's place beforehand, and we're having this kind of view on this plant city, which is gorgeous.
Nice. Okay.
So sorry for all the technical stress. We were all struggling with the teams. Nothing worked. It just told us that there are errors, but it didn't tell us why and what we can do about it. It was just
like
not
with
letting
4
us
computers and 4 different kind of internet and servers and whatever. I mean, this would be the time to make a plaidoyer for never ever use Teams again.
I'll pass it on. I'll pass it on to our university administrators.
Yeah, why is it like that? That like all around Europe, in all the universities, everyone has to use it. Nevertheless, you're not even anymore in the European Union. So I don't get this.
Well, we're being told data privacy issues. But at least this way, if Microsoft has everything, right?
Yeah, but Michael has to give away all his like telephone number and email just to enter it. So that's about privacy, just to enter Teams.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's disgusting.
We can't trust
that much better. Anyway, here we are.
Can't trust these artists.
Here we are. I'm force quitting Teams in the background. All right. So with a bit of a delay, here we are. Nevertheless, I'm very excited that you folks were able to join us. Total Refusal, and Joseph, of course, is here as well. I'm recording this, so for everyone who had a struggle getting on this call, we'll share it later on. Because it's recorded, let's be friendly, obviously. Yeah. How should we kick it off? Can I ask the Total Refusal folks to maybe briefly introduce yourselves? And then I'll ask Joseph to do the same, and then we'll take it from there, right?
I mean, we are Total Refusal. We are very, very happy to meet ancestors and big like role models of whatever we are doing here. We are pseudo-Marxist media guerrilla. We are working in the field of video games and appropriating and intervening into them, using them as a media or as a media for new purposes, for artistical purposes, but also for films. And that's Robin, and Michael is the guy with the beard, the bloke. We are the founding fathers. And one of our new team members since 2021 is Jona Kleinlein. He's also a Machinima artist, doing Machinimas like films in video games. We doubled our size from 3 members to 6 members, like with Susanna Flock and Adrian Heim as well, since 2021.
And the work that we do, I'd say that follows different paradigms. One is that we are really interested in a discussion, in a broader discussion of the medium of video games, basically of big video games, of so-called AAA video games, as those are they have such an important influence and on society. They play such an important role commercially and socially and culturally especially on younger people. So it's just, they're too big to ignore. And at the same time, we always say that we kind of follow, we try to upcycle them in some sense. So to use the scenes, to use the scenarios, all these amazing graphics and visual design effects in order to tell stories that we find important. And so, but at the same time, also to criticize and to kind of look behind the mechanisms of these pieces of work.
Cool. Thanks for that. Joseph, do you also want to give just a bit of context for what your access is to this kind of technology and video games?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks, Martin, for organizing this. Really wonderful to meet the Total Refusal crew. Yeah, I've been working with video games since the late 90s, I guess, in my practice. Started kind of going into them for kind of experimental performative interventions in 2001, and it was kind of I think some very we share some interests for certain in terms of our approaches, and I think my initial interest was considering these at the time kind of new kind of 3D environments made accessible over the internet as a new type of public space, you know, as like really thinking of these as a kind of new commons, if you would. And then, you know, then also considering, well, okay, there's these rules of play in these spaces. Why do you have to follow them? Why can't you do other things? And so started, you know, experimenting, doing poetry readings, then performing entire TV shows in game spaces, and then becoming really kind of overtly politicized in the 2000s, sort of mid 2000s, with the Iraq War and 9/11 and all that horribleness. But it is I think, yeah, I think we definitely kind of share an approach of kind of considering agency in these spaces that have become vastly significant cultural environments, right? I mean, these are where people spend so much of their time, and it was a kind of way of thinking, okay, how do you bring some different content or some kind of alternative ways of being into these spaces? And yeah, so it's a definitely, yeah, that's me, and it's I think like a lot of game artists shift from, you know, strictly sort of media, digital based, screen based experiences then into real world kind of object making and in reaction to and kind of connected with and all that. And yeah, it's a really sort of fascinating new territory that I think is become, you know, so relevant these days to where we are and where we're possibly going. So yeah, great to be here. And that's me. And I'm a professor here at Abertay, of course. But yeah, that's me.
You guys were saying you consider your work as a bit of a method of upcycling material, which is a really great term to use, I think. You know, not let that footage go to waste, I guess. You also mentioned appropriation as a critical mode. And of course, Machinima in some capacity is a way of, you know, or resonates with histories of found footage filmmaking. So do you all actually, and maybe, you know, all of you, Total Refusal, Joseph as well, you actually, I mean, would you consider video games a new medium still? Because upcycling to me suggests that there is already a landfill full of garbage, and we're picking something out of it, or we're making something else with it, right? So do you approach video game technologies as a form of new medium, as we might have, you know, defined it 5 years ago, even still, or not so much anymore? And what does that change, if there is a change there? I'm asking myself as well.
Well, I mean, in our case, in the case of Total Refusal, we're working mostly with mainstream video games, which are stuck kind of in the same rut as blockbuster films in a way, that there is like a technical escalation from year to year, but they're sort of stuck in narrative loops, telling the same tropes over and over again. So I guess that's where the upcycling comes from, to the term of upcycling, that we're trying to appropriate the technical resources to tell the stories that aren't told in this medium. I mean, for example, if you take our movie How to Disappear, we've played war from the perspective of like typical hero type soldiers, like dozens, if not hundreds of times. Yet, even though desertion is an integral part of warfare, there is no mainstream game that tells the story of war from the perspective of the deserter. And of course, there are many other perspectives worth having a look at. So I guess the whole blockbuster, given that we're working mostly with mainstream games, I don't consider video games as a new medium, and the upcycling part comes more from trying to kind of find a better utilization for these really extravagant technical resources. Yeah.
When in the earlier times of curating Vector Festival, which I've been a co-curator for quite a number of years, we often had kind of a interesting pushback from video art or experimental art audiences who would come into gallery spaces and be like, video games, I don't want anything to do with that. And I don't know any, or they would say, I don't know anything about that. I can't connect with this artwork for that reason, because it is a mainstream medium, because it requires me to use a controller and I don't know how, and things like that. And so a struggle has been, maybe less so now, but for a long time, the struggle has been to convince art audiences that might consider themselves a little bit more on the fringes or edges that, yeah, you can look at a Machinima piece and think about it a little bit more. And at the same time, we would have local indie game developer communities coming to exhibition openings and also being very baffled by what is happening here. Right. I guess where I'm getting at with this is that a lot of the really exciting stuff that's been happening with your work is that you're showing it at festivals. Oftentimes, I understand these are film festivals that might not necessarily be full of audiences that have a really good awareness of histories, critical histories of machinima. So what's your perspective on situating your work in that whole spectrum between, interventions in mainstream video game communities, more experimental, maybe video art histories, but then also film or moving image arts? Where do you fall into that spectrum?
I would consider Total Refusal a highly political collective, and if you're doing political interventions, there is no better material than mass media, because that's effectively where cultural values are negotiated. So the fact that it's mainstream media, to me, shouldn't be a reason at all that it's getting scoffed at in like some art contexts. It's precisely the reason why it's worthwhile doing art in this segment, is that it's mainstream media. And I guess, I mean, maybe so that I'm not the only one talking here, you other guys could elaborate on this a bit more, but we've always established as a goal that Total Refusal projects aren't mainly targeted at the art context. I mean, we do, of course, we're in the same like kind of value loop where our films go through film festivals and so on, but really the end goal is to kind of also break out and connect more with gamers or people who use the medium.
Yeah, I would second that. I think the art world's kind of total refusal to accept games on some level is yeah, it's yeah, okay, that's all right. I think one of the things that drew me to games in some ways was there was this potential other audience. You know, it's like I really, you know, like the last project I did, Elegy, which was on live streamed on Twitch for a year, got like 235,000 views, and that's, yeah, that's probably nothing for a Twitch, typical Twitch stream of a big gamer, but it's like, you know, you have an exhibition of this work in a gallery, you might get a couple thousand people coming in. You know, it's like, I think that's, and it's going before eyeballs that I love it when people come to those things and they're like, they're putting questions in the comment, like, what the fuck is this? What am I looking at? And then you get in a conversation. You know, it's this, you can say, oh, I'm doing this thing and here's what it is. And you know, it's a possibility of, I think, expanding the reach of art beyond these kind of confusing settings of galleries where people come in and don't know what they're looking at. So yeah, I don't know. I think it is possible. And I also think one of the things, the cool things with Total Refusal's work is that, you know, in reading some of the stuff on your website, the that kind of that attitude of trying to make games a bit more known to the art world and art known to the game world, you know, type thing. That's pretty cool. And I think there is especially like a machinima. Like I was watching your Marx's take on Red Dead Redemption this morning, and you know, it's the type of thing that, you know, my mom could watch and get a sense of that space, because you hear about these games, you hear about Red Dead Redemption, you hear about GTA, you hear all of these things, and if, you know, if a huge part of the population has never experienced those, all they've seen are media representations and still shots and, you know, violence and what causes school shootings and all this crap. So when you kind of humanize it and then politicize it at the same time, and give access and kind of tour around it, and it's funny and you're running over things and it's, you know, you're clumsily going through these spaces with this really serious political kind of dialogue. I think it's great. I think it creates an accessible point of entry for a lot of folks, and I think that's great. You're showing these things at film festivals.
Did you feel like there was a shift in that, Joseph, for you? You know, in over the course of your practice, because your first projects maybe were, you know, first bigger machinima projects were happening in a context where there might have been, you know, even more disregard or kind of lack of acceptance of that.
Yeah, I missed the first couple of words there.
Is there like was there, in your experience, kind of a historical shift, or, you know, a shift in that over the period of time that you did machinima work?
Well, and I should say, you know, I probably didn't consider my work machinima work until I was actually invited to write a chapter for a book on machinima. And I was like, oh, I'm doing these live performance things and I'm recording them. Hey, I guess it's machinima, you know. It's sort of like, okay, and actually kind of reframed in my mind, sort of thinking about it on those terms. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it was an interesting, I don't know, it was a curious context when I got into games, because I was actually living and working in Reno, Nevada, in the high desert in the US, and I was literally like the media artist in northern Nevada. And, you know, it was games and game art at that, you know, in that context, even just media art, media-based practice in the late 90s in that region was just kind of invisible. And I felt very isolated and very alone. And I started playing these games in some sense out of sort of, you know, boredom, and then was like, oh, this is the whole world. And it was a way of using the internet and using this kind of live context to reach an audience that I didn't have, in a way, being an isolated artist working in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, I don't know. It was for me, it was almost like falling into this space as a way of, and then seeing the potential of it, but also seeing, yeah, at first feeling this is really silly. Like I can go into this space and actually perform poetry, and, you know, it's like I didn't know if this was interesting, significant, whatever. And I just kind of, sometimes those experimental ideas that you take on that you're just not sure whether they're interesting, they just come back and they nag at you. And then it's like, okay, well, let's try this, let's try that. And you see what kind of works. And yeah, so it's, I don't know, the art world's never really been my best friend in a way. So it's kind of like I'll work in this space, and even if I'm not always welcome here, which is kind of part of what I do in a way, that's fine by me.
I want to ask a question about you know, what different types of modalities or media exist actually in Machinima as well. Some of the work, you know, some of the terms that have already come up here now is performance, but also you know, video art. So there is interactive work. There is work that exists as a time-based artwork. To the Total Refusal crew, do you consider these different types of manifestations of Machinima when you kind of conceive a project? I know that some of your pieces actually seem to exist in all of these variations, right? And so it's actually, it can be tricky to understand precisely what, you know, what are the parameters of some of your individual projects, because I know they show at film festivals, but then you also do performances that speak to these particular works. So are these just very blurry lines? Do you deliberately set up your projects so that they can be performed, but also screened and other things like that?
Yeah, pretty much what you're saying. I mean, to be honest, we never really cared much about these
art world.
Yeah, about these art world categories. Just, yeah, when we started with our first project, the initial project Operation Jane Walk, which is a city tour through the architecture of an online shooter. So we run through New York City in the division, and we talk about architecture and urban history and stuff, trying not to get shot. We just did this because we found it interesting and funny and a challenge to do it in these surroundings, and we simply wanted to share it with people, so we recorded it pretty much as Joseph described it. On one point, people said, yeah, you're filmmakers, you're doing machinimas, and we were saying, yeah, well, okay, well, why not? Then people said, you're making documentary movies, then we said, well, okay, why not? Or people said, you're doing animation film. I mean, I'm fine with all of that, but I really don't really care so much. It's just good if there are formats which people can see. So of course it makes sense to bring the things that we do in a format that, yeah, that has a stage. But it doesn't really, I'm not so much into the discussions, but it's great if there are some academics take their time to answer these questions and tell us what we are. That's perfectly fine.
I mean, we are academics ourselves, as well as we have our totally pretentious, it's called our research department, to also like when we are in the games, we are analyzing the game world and the mechanisms and narrations and whatever, and also like to contextualize ourselves within all the De Lappe works he has done so far. And I completely agree. I mean, you are kind of a father of another mother for us in that sense that what as you have said before is really deeply what we are thinking about. Like we don't give a lot of shit to the art world. I mean, it's not the best place to be actually if you want to reach out for audience. There is no audience, it's not paid at all. You're super precarious. The political aims is just symbolic, politics mainly, but they stay within their culture bourgeois surroundings and try to not step out of their bubbles a lot. So it's pseudo-academic. So what to gain there within this? And it's super market driven as well. So what to gain there? And we share this kind of we want to like we want to be consumed and appreciated by like our mothers, like the work we do.
Always our main target group are our mothers. Yeah. They have to give permission, otherwise.
Yeah, they have to be. Nevertheless, like my mother was against always me playing computer games, and now I'm telling her that I'm traveling around Europe because I am playing computer games. What you, mom, restricted so harshly when I was younger. So this is kind our field. We are like a bit in the art worlds, mainly in the film festival world, which is also a bubble, but it's a more inclusive one. Like film festivals very often are in the center of some village, or sometimes they're like have a huge audience beyond their like filmmakers just. And then also like this is the next step we are really struggling with, and then that's where Jona comes into play, when we are trying to like get to the gamers, get to the game world. We have this kind of catch line with we want to share the beauty of arts to the game world, and we want to share the beauty of games to the art world.
I guess like what to maybe answer your question relating to practice is that I guess we try to play together regularly, and then when there is potential in a video game, and that we experience ourselves, I think we come up with a concept, or we think, okay, there's potential, maybe we can make a movie out of this, or we can make a performance out of this, or there's like we kind of like have a discussion during the play in a way, like we talk about what we see and what we hear, and what the topic of the game is and how we can appropriate it. Yeah, so it's not like always that conceptual, it's kind of like
what you said about kind of reaching gamers or bridging these worlds, it makes me think a bit about what was it called, This Spartan Life, right? Like that kind of Saturday Night Live type talk show that Chris Burke used to do in Halo, in the online version of Halo. Were you ever on that, Joseph?
Not on that one, no.
Okay. But are you guys familiar with it? No, I don't have to drop something in the link. So this was, another great Machinima artist, Chris Burke, who's part of the Foci Loci collective, I guess, in New York. And I don't know if it still runs, but it was a Machinima talk show that had experimental media artists as guests. I dropped the link in the chat here. But it would also have game developers or people doing audio design and game music. So it was a really diverse kind of audience. The whole thing took place in I guess it was in Halo 2, maybe. Anyways, it was an online environment in which people would run around in avatars, and Chris would host it. Right. Can you tell us a bit more about Operation Jane Walk as kind of as a more an example of recent work that you've done? Because I think this is also available to see in full online for the next, what is it, like 24 hours or something, right?
Yeah, sure. Operation Jane Walk is actually not our most recent work, but our oldest work. Actually, it was the initial thing, so it got the thing started, and it was really influenced by works like from Joseph, like Death in Iraq was really something that changed our perspective of what you can do in a video game. So this definitely played part, or also Ivan Franco Matte's work. So it's something that the rest came after it somehow. But we already before we did it, we kind of knew that that's the thing to do, right? This medium, it needs to be done something with it. So we were actively searching for input. So we came across Joseph's work, and Leon started to write his thesis, his PhD thesis about the question of disobedience within, or artistic disobedience within video games. So that's when everything started. But yeah, it's true. You can just watch it online for free. So it's open available now on Vimeo for quite a time, At the moment, we are
And YouTube, even though, because some people put it on YouTube, which was one of our biggest success, that someone just like pirated it.
Yeah, hopefully it will be pirated more.
Yeah.
And now, like in 2 days, on May 7th, our second film will be released openly on Vimeo. Also, something we're really looking forward, because you know, there's this stupid logic of film festivals that they want to have premieres and stuff. So it restricts somehow the accessibility of the things we do, which is somehow a bit a pity, because of course we work with contemporary games. In that case, it's Battlefield 5, like multiplayer online shooter, and it really doesn't make sense to work with a game that isn't played anymore, that isn't in the discourse anymore. As soon as the next Battlefield would be released, no one would be interested in the old Battlefield. So it's kind of, yeah, we try to be on time. So it's great that it will be released now openly, and hopefully it will reach some targets.
We have Featherfall, which is also not restricted by any kind of password, available and in the internet on our website. And then like our tours, Everyday Daylight, I think is also like is a documentation documented with my hobby English and with the beautiful English of my colleagues.
Sorry, I was just looking for a link to share.
I put a link to Jane Walk.
Cool. So do you use like in-game tools for making your work primarily, or what do your rigs look like? What's your setup for doing a lot of this?
I guess it depends, because some games allow more to be more creatively in the process, and some games we do need to mod or like change some stuff that allows us to film inside. Like for example in Red Dead Redemption, where we organized the modder for us that made some tools that let us change models or turn into birds, or some simple stuff like a god mode to be invincible. Yeah, but I guess with in Battlefield 5, it was like mainly the spectator tool, which is just there for everyone to use. There's many interesting videos that uses the spectator tool already, and I guess it's really always really challenging, because because it gives you so many limits. There's like a time delay, so you have to organize when you want to time something right. Someone appears in the frame or something, you have to wait some minutes to that, so it actually shows stuff like that. But I mean, there's a lot of, it always depends on the game, I guess, how much.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, as Jonas said, there are exceptions, but for the most part, we try to use games in an unmodded state, to kind of, because it stays true to this, I guess, motto of upcycling, of reusing the resources that are there already. And it's also interesting how the limitation the game provides then influence the project. I guess that also harks back to your question about the various forms of projects, like for example, whether a project has a performative character. That is something that is often just dictated by the game that you're working in. Because for example, in Battlefield, where How to Disappear was filmed, there are no private servers. There is no, or at least back then there weren't. So you can't just like film, you can't just use the game as a backdrop to film. You have to be part of a running game with 64 players.
Yeah, a public space, I guess,
yeah,
you could say.
So really, if you're doing a machinima there, it always has, depending on what you're doing, of course, but it always has some sort of performative character. And in How to Disappear, that also shows in the kind of unplanned interactions with other players.
Shall we give you like a short screen share on How to Disappear? Maybe you.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah.
like maybe the first minute or something, we could show you like the basic
The first
questions.
minutes are for free. Yeah.
And the rest will be shown in 2 days. I think you just have to allow me to share my screen, Martin. That would be great. I think you have to allow a screen share for several users or something like that. Then it should work.
Yep. I don't use. I do not use Zoom.
Or you could make me a co-host if you want with your right-clicking our portrait.
There you go.
Oh yeah, perfect. So let's watch a few.
Bless you.
War cannot be played. By definition, is voluntarily, and for most of the participants, there's nothing voluntary about a war in the rail world. This is a war game. It is a game that tries to depict war, a game that makes war consumable. However, there is something important missing in the game's depiction. Since the advent of war, there have always been people who refused to fight and who have turned away from the battlefield. Deserters. Desertion is a part of human history, just as much as warfare is. If you refuse to play a game, you are a spoilsport. If you refuse to fight in war, you are a deserter. But can you actually desert in a game? Take a step beyond the playing field, and the world loses its color. And then...
Soldier, return to the combat area immediately!
Battlefield only consists of a battlefield. Whoever attempts to leave is immediately executed. We do not see who fires this killing shot. It's the software which upholds the rules. And its power is divine.
It's very nice to see.
Yeah. Can't wait for the whole thing to go on video.
It brings to mind. I recall when I was doing the America's Army project, that in Iraq, you had to go through basic training in order to be able to play that game. So you had to go to rifle training, you had to do obstacle course and something else. And there's of course like a drill sergeant at one point or somebody, and I remember, just like out of curiosity, what happens if you kill this person, right? And so I shot him. I think it's the only time in that game I ever shot anybody, just to see what would happen. And that game had an algorithm that actually put you in a jail cell. And there was then, I think, a sound of a harmonica playing like you were in jail kind of thing. And you had to sit there for a few minutes until it let you back into the game to start again. But yeah, those issues of edges of these spaces are always fascinating, and I really like that notion of exploring the deserter and the yeah. I recall one of the first books I ever read about war was in school, called The Red Badge of Courage. It's a text you read in the States. It's a Civil War novel, anti-war novel, and it's about a deserting Union soldier in the Civil War. Quite fascinating, but great stuff. Really cool to see.
Reminds me also a bit of, or really, maybe this is a question. Do you guys think that a pacifist playthrough of a first-person shooter or of an RPG, is that a kind of civil disobedience or resistance to the kind of algorithmically enforced violence that otherwise happens in the game?
I think we've seen that you see those stories come up every now and then. Like I just saw one recently about someone in World of Warcraft going around planting flowers, I think, and not being killed for ages.
Yeah, it's a druid that reached the highest possible level just by collecting like a billion of plants or something like this. Yeah,
I mean, I think they are pacifist gestures to a certain extent, but I think they're also kind of showing prowess of gameplay. I think there's that. It has to be sort of measured against both of those. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, those people are heroes, definitely, and it's pretty much our approach as well, I guess, because it not only like shows that there is another options is possible, but actually it shows the opposite. It shows how absurd it is. And it basically, by breaking those norms in the game that you should kill, otherwise it's not really, you're not really playing the game as it's supposed to be. So you are a spoiler sport in some sense if you refuse to do that and if you just collect plants. So apparently it shows kind of the logic, so it shows it makes clear how the rules are. So of course that really inspired us as well.
I guess the spoil sport is that it's kind of like you maybe a spoil sport for the other participants of the game, but maybe not for the creators of the game in a way, like because for them it doesn't matter what you do inside the or like publishers or server hosts or something. For them it's like all the same. Maybe.
It's interesting that you have two sorts of games on the blockbuster area. One is like all these kind of AAA games with this generic stories and with this military gameplay, and the other one is Minecraft. And Minecraft wasn't intended to be a blockbuster, but it became like I think the most played game ever, or one of the 3 most played games ever. And like they're so different. Like it could be there could be 2 genres. Like one genre is you can do whatever you want and you can be super creative, and the other one is follow exactly the game mode or the gameplay, which is intended by industry, which is shaped by marketing, which is a super investment space, which you just kind of a consumer rather than like someone who is trying to develop the identity as well as its own gameplay or its own world. And this is super interesting for us. Maybe that's what game is. This is super interesting for us to see that all the other gamers, a lot of the participants of the community are doing exactly the same what Joseph and we are trying to do, like bend the rules, like completely try to be creative, to be disobedient with the game, because this is the way how we are appropriate some space to make it our own space, to become our own space in order to like make something of our own. And this is where the game industry, like not the indie, but rather the blockbuster one, has to reach out for, to make it more become a social space, or as well like a place like Minecraft that you just not follow this kind of line of military whatever.
I have to say that reminds me of I think a point of departure for me where I started to think about games being possible as a sort of site for creative, more than just play, you know, more than that was it was probably in 98 or 99, and I was playing Unreal online, and I started going into kind of modded servers, you know, and there were these amazing worlds that were created by just, you know, gamers, and one of them was it was like a kitchen that had been redone, and you were playing in miniature like you were the size of a mouse, and it was so intricate and so beautifully and lovingly done, and I was like, this is like a new type of folk art. Like this is actually, like, this is more interesting than any of the art I've actually seen in a gallery in the last 10 years. You know, it was like, and it just kind of blew me away. And so I think, yeah, there is this kind of, and sadly, I think a lot of the games since then have kind of shut down access to that kind of agency for players. And you know, they used to allow, you know, the things to be open and kind of a bit more kind of modifiable. But yeah, so I think there is that aspect to this, and some of the stuff going on in Minecraft is just incredible. You know, it's like you just so yeah, it's this whole world that's going on kind of behind our backs in a way, which is very exciting.
It always seems to me though that a lot of this is really just a simulation of agency as well, right? I mean, you're still bound by the you know, I guess the concept of algorithmic governance is interesting here. Like, you're still bound by the parameters that the game logic provides for you. So I always have very big doubts that Minecraft or Little Big Planet or any of these sandbox kind of creative games that they truly afford you a freedom to express anything, because there are inevitable limits to what the game logic allows or doesn't allow, right? Like, so in that way, I almost find it more powerful when you don't mod anything at all, and you really just repurpose like a spectator tool or game footage that you capture to play out narratives that are really critical of the dominant narrative tropes that the game may be built around.
Definitely, and I think that's just what Joseph also said. Those game spaces, they are not really public spaces. They're semi-public spaces, of course, because they're owned, and they serve capitalist function. They are investments. There's no there's nothing in a game which would reduce its possibility to make money with it. So we have been talking about World of Warcraft, for instance, which is, of course, in some sense, a pioneer in how to establish a social space within a game, because it really, the whole community was there and people played it for so long time, and people, you know, all these stories, people got married there, and like a whole culture was built around it. But of course, ultimately, this wasn't just done in order to create a public space, but it was done because the business model of World of Warcraft is made in a way that you have to pay monthly. So you don't pay it once and then it's yours, but you have to pay monthly. So that's the motivation for the establishment of a great social space, because it wants to keep you there, and it's basically it's like a great space, but it's also a trap. So they profit from that. So of course, like, if you really want to think about those gaming spaces as being something really emancipatory, offering real agency, then I think it will be difficult within a capitalist framework. Then they should really become commons. I guess. I mean, it's maybe a bit different with part of the indie games where the relationship between the developer and the gamer is not so exclusively reduced to a market relationship, but it still is. So of course they want to make money, and so that really, that's quite, I think, the biggest problem within this medium in general?
I think, yeah, one of the capitalist best practice model who are kind of on the border of enabling people to find their identity there and create social space is maybe GTA 5, but it's also like reduced whatever you can do there. I think Jona isn't Arma 3 kind of a poster boy of this kind of approach to like.
Well, yeah, I've been thinking about that, but I think like it's still has the same problem that it's a sandbox that you're confined to set up a conflict situation in a way. Like it already starts with like that there's just male avatars to choose from, like from by default, for example. It's like like the stereotypical soldier that patrols or something. If you want to populate a city, you have to populate it with male civilists that function as a backdrop or like a canvas for the conflict. And like everything is kind of limited, but of course there's mods that mod females into the game, and there's other people that put things in that enrich the community, and there's a huge modding community within Armor. But I mean, most of the stuff is just focused on making the armed conflict more realistic or more tense for the participants, I think.
It's sometimes upsetting to see how much energy and effort within gaming communities is expelled or exerted on efforts to make, as you said, like the fighting experience more realistic. So essentially a complete letting yourself be completely assimilated into the market model of the game. So then, I mean, can this is maybe a crazy question, but since you're a pseudo-Marxist collective by your own characterization, how would you conceive of like a structural materialist critique of these game environments? I mean, do you have to completely negate narrative, which is difficult to do in the kinds of games you work with? Do you hack the game to the point where it breaks completely? Is that the ultimate kind of appropriative mode? Anyways, I'm curious about this idea of a structural materialist critique. Can that happen through Machinima?
Well, I would suggest that what we're doing is providing kind of models of behavior. It's like if you can do this in a game, you could do it in real life, kind of thing. And that's kind of my thinking in a way. It's a way to sort of create a point of resistance to the larger meta narrative. And I think kind of in answer to your previous question, I think it is a bit. When you were describing Warcraft a moment ago, it's like, it's the same thing with Facebook. It's the same thing with Google and the internet. It's like you're giving over something to do this, to be here right now, to sitting in Zoom, right? Our data is being gathered and all of that. So I mean, we're functioning within this internet system that is basically a big tool of shifting cash around the globe to exploit the resources and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's like in some ways I think we're trying to provide these models and ways of behavior that run a bit counter. It might be like spitting against a hurricane sometimes, but I think that is something there. And one other thing I wanted to say, I wanted to say this earlier. You were talking about GTA a moment ago. 2 nights ago, Ellie and I were watching Moonraker. Was on TV, like one of the worst James Bond films ever, and it's just fantastic. But I was watching it and I was thinking to myself, it's like this has like the same narrative structure and about the same quality of the narrative as most games, including GTA. It's like it is this kind of stupid, guy, and then women there for their pleasure and all these kind of things. But it's really worth watching just to sort of get a sense of how stilted that side of things remains in terms of how things are made. But sorry, that's a bit going backwards. But
total refusal. You wanna take me up on my question for structural materialist machinima, or not? It's fine.
Michael?
Okay. Tricky. Okay, I guess, I mean, our approaches would be twofold. I mean, we've already mentioned that one thing we're trying to do is to take in or to tell our narratives from perspectives, so to shed light on perspectives that are typically ignored within games. And that's just one component. I think the other important bit is to not forget the medium that you're using to tell a new story. So for example, I mean, a lot of machinimas, of course, there are plenty of machinimas that are not situated in the context of the art world, and there you see, and also that's the case with some machinimas that are considered as art. They use games as a backdrop. So basically, the game is just like a stage picture. It's a hyper-realist stage picture that just serves as like a technical tool to tell a story in, and that to us misses one critical point, which is to consider this hyper-realist media itself. So our projects are always partly also about deconstructing hyperrealism, deconstructing the medium that you're working with, showing the place of the medium in the context of for example, the market, and not just basically using it as technical resources. And I guess if these are if both these criteria are fulfilled, that would to us form like a valid critical work. Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier about ownership, or about the kind of property-oriented, intellectual property-oriented circuits that all of this kind of moves around in. Have you run into any issues around that? There are limits to what a developer or a publisher wants you to do in terms of modding. And generally speaking, companies start paying attention when someone starts to be somewhat successful with the work that they do. This has always been true for found footage filmmakers or appropriation artists. Is this something that's on your radar? Maybe also as a hook for a critique, that kind of undermining of the IP circuits around the gaming industry could, to me, it's very interesting as well. Anyways, have you had any cease and desist letters from anyone?
I just want to jump back to the last question because it's super important for us. I mean, just one sentence or two. Like we are always talking about hyperrealism, which is basically the aesthetics of capitalism. Like get the images all over the place. When you start your browser, when you look at your phone, when you look out of the window, like everything is, you're always confronted with perfect images of perfect people looking perfectly happy. So like even if you go into the pharmacy and wherever, everything is like stuffed and filled by this terror of images. And this is like a term coined by the French Marxist philosopher Jean Baudrillard. So there is no escape from this kind of hyperrealism. And video games are, I think, the peak of this kind of world because you dive in, and it's not just like you have hyperrealism on your phone or on your PC or on your brochure. It's just that you are within hyperrealism. Everything is perfect, including yourself. I mean, we have to fight against this kind of hyperrealism wherever we can. It's a very easy job because it's just very easy to criticize this obvious aesthetics. Like it's like when people, like especially the very few machinima artists, female machinima artists, they criticizing this like identities which are so like prototype, archetype, stereotyping, fitting to the images, hyperrealist images of how a woman should look or how a bloke or a man should look. Like this is one. And the other question is that we are, I would be very interested what Joseph would say about this, but we reached a new step in this kind of copyright question, because with Operation Chain Walk was demanded by Arte, like by the broadcasting company of Arte France, Germany, and then we said no, we can't. We don't see any kind of possibility for you, not just for you to broadcast Operation Chain Walk, not just because of us, we would love to, but because of Ubisoft, the developer of the game we were filming in. And they were just phoning them, and then they gave us the rights. Like I think it's one of the. Is this the first time in history? Are we the first pioneers of all humankind, Joseph, or are you even more firster?
I've had two instances of that might shed some light on that, but the first was actually, it wasn't a game company. It was when I did Quake Friends. Recreated a Friends episode in Quake, and it got reported in the New York Times, and the next day, and it was the day before the performance, I got a cease and desist from Warner Brothers Television, and they were basically, you can't use Friends material and and I pushed back against that, because in the States you have fair use laws, and it was criticism, and it was an obvious case where I could go forward with that. The other time this came up was the Imperial War Museum here in the UK acquired the Machinima of Dead in Iraq for their permanent collection, and somewhere halfway through the process, it almost railroaded the entire thing. They were like, oh, well, who owns the copyright to this? Like, what's the copyright issues on this? And I was like, and I said the same thing. Like, in the States, this is protected speech. It's criticism. There's some protections in the UK, but very different. And they pretty much just decided to let it lie. And if it does come up, it would need to be addressed at some point. But those are really interesting questions.
I mean, that's actually the process or the approach that the law prescribes, right? Like, you don't know if it's fair use or fair dealing until someone's accused you of copyright infringement.
Exactly.
And you argued otherwise. To everyone, if that issue comes up, I would love to hear from you, because that's one of the things that I do kind of a lot to advise artists on how not to be bullied by IP owners and copyright owners. Anyways, yeah. So that's an interesting anecdote about art. And I was thinking about that earlier, because film festivals tend to sometimes have the same issues, right? Like, they need to actually get insurance for these kinds of problems, or film distributors. And then if you don't hold the rights, they might just, as a matter of principle, say, no, we can't distribute your work, because who knows what's going to happen. Very interesting stuff.
I just remember that Gorillaz had this music video made entirely in GTA 5, and I think it had to be taken down, and then it resurfaced a year ago, I think, and then it was officially granted to be shown, as far as I remember. So I guess the climate changes as well. Like, it's like there's video game companies that encourage Machinima, like Bohemia Interactive. They always encouraged like the creation within their games, and but like with I'm not so sure about who owns the rights then. Still, like, yeah, I guess it's still a question that's open in the end.
I mean, your work is always it has such a critical dimension to it and critical edge to it. And I would any day for all of it say it's protected speech in terms of it being criticism and review or parody. Anyways, sorry, I cut you off, Leon.
Sorry. I just wanted to add that that museums or film festivals are the problem as well, not just the industry in restricting. So we talked about this kind of logics to hold back just for the the dedicated crowd and the audience, which is arty and like bourgeois enough to visit some film festivals.
And yet
They
I
want to
think
be
that,
able
like,
to put, they want to be able to say it's a world premiere in their program announcements, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or a country premiere, or it's just not like there are a lot of film festivals which don't take so much attention into premieres, but they say if it's available for free, we won't screen it. Like there were some film festivals which had rejected, like which they took us in, and after then they were rejecting us when they were recognizing, oh, we have a free link.
but it's even like this logic in the film festival scene. It's even more absurd, like in the last year, as there were almost no like physical film premieres, but almost all of the festivals just happened in the digital space. So there were digital screenings, or basically you could just watch them. But they still try to hold on this logic by restricting the access to certain countries or stuff, which of course would prevent no one from seeing it from somewhere else. But well, yeah, let's hope that things will change.
I think in the future times we will just ask some very clever hacker, or not even like it's very simple, like to get it from some film festival browser and website, and then to just like put it into YouTube, and we won't.
We already do that.
We won't sue this person. Like it might. So, and we also pay this person, this pirate, to put it on Reddit and everywhere where just like gamers and the community is. So I think we would do that, like to counterfight our inner logics we are like also having a living from. Like it's an existential question as well.
Now,
I guess the interest.
Sounds like
Sorry.
what I do with my academic publications that are behind paywalls.
And can I suggest maybe if there's any questions, I actually have a 1:30 meeting. If there are questions from people who are in
Everyone who's around, you want to drop your questions in the chat while we keep talking here, so that and I can keep going a little bit longer if there's interest. Sorry, somebody was going to say something else.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, like with NFT, in the media art, like this with the blockchain thing and the all this stuff that's happening right now is like really absurd. That like this whole logic goes into like tries to like the digital copy, like the endless digital copy gets like individualized again, or like one copy is like special in a way. And that's it's really such a strange development and really fascinating as well, I think, because
Artificially scarce digital object. Completely absurd. Yeah. So there isn't going to be a total refusal drop of on open seas or
Yuna just got like this how do you say, like
yesterday I got a mail by a curator team from Moscow that wanted to auction off one of my works, and if I would be interested in that, in a digital auction with like an NFT tag. It was really strange mail, and I
Do you join, Jona?
I was thinking about like asking more about it because I was so curious.
Just send them your bank details.
Yeah, your wallet hat. Did anyone in the room have a question to throw in the ring? I know there's a few bars.
If not, then I would just love to ask. Oh, we have one.
Perfect.
Marianne comments, something that interests me is how media, whether it's film or games, has always acted as a kind of litmus test for society. What do you think the current video games say about us as a society?
I mean, as Joseph, I think, put it up. No, as Michael put it up already. Mass media is a kind of like seismograph where you can see all the discussions of values and identities and aesthetics, like hyperrealism, for example, being negotiated at. So as Marshall McLuhan once said, like, if you really want to know something about society, just consume mass media. And this is of course, it's about a common sense. It's not something which which is transported and ventilated and looped within society. It's the common sense and not like the dissident voices. And about the common sense, you can really learn a lot about how we work and how we reflect ourselves. It's getting more and more absurd when the more money is involved in, like with Marvel films, which are made up just like with statistics. Like every scene is statistically researched in which kind of character, which kind of ending every scene has to have, is kind of made is kind of decided by a survey. And video games, I assume, like Ubisoft video games, are done in the same way, that on the board of the developers, there is also a huge connection or supervision, even though, from marketing department, who are controlling how the developers and the one who are making the script, writing the script and shaping also the characters are doing. So this is completely controlled by this kind of search for the common senses within society.
Something we have been discussing a lot in the last time is those meta narratives that you can find in the games, because of course they are really revealing also somehow processes and values, as you said. So that, like, something that you can really find in almost every game is that you start small and you grow, your power grows through the game. So you start like as a small nobody, and in the end you are the master of the universe. So what you do is you dominate the territory you are thrown into, and in the end nothing can defeat you anymore. You're like your biggest, doesn't matter if it's a strategy game or if it's a RPG or shooter or whatever. So usually this is like one of the really basic narratives that so of course they kind of you can see some logic of growth there, as it kind of, this really I think reflects in the market logic of kind of an aim that you want to fulfill, but at the same time also it's basically a power fantasy. So you can be strong and you dominate something, so that, which is I think a very strong cultural pattern, and in video games this is really obvious, I think.
If I could answer Marianne's question as well, I think one thing that's been really fascinating is to see like how popular Animal Crossing became during the pandemic. And I got it I bought myself a Switch for Christmas to play it and some other things, but it's just a hoarding game, right? It's basically doing something we really can't do very well during the pandemic, not, going shopping, fishing, collecting, doing all these things. I mean, we still are, I guess, with Amazon ordering and all that, but yeah, that notion, and I think there's a basic structure to so many video games that's just based on competition and winning and beating everybody else. There's very little cooperation. There's very little kind of support, kind of, it is that individual focus, et cetera, which is a very neoliberal kind of philosophy that comes through as things are. But yeah, I think that definitely reflects, and they're made for it. They're made to do that,
It's a sad state of affairs.
I very much like, there was, I don't know, like 2 years ago or something, there was a story in the media about like a farmer in the US sitting on his super huge GPS controlled truck machine that does the harvesting or something. and he basically just sits on the machine the whole day, and the machine itself drives around the fields, and he just has to be there and to see if nothing goes wrong. And while he sits on this super huge truck thing, he the whole day he plays farmland or farm. What's it called? Farmville. Yeah, basically harvesting while he's harvesting. But which is so revealing, of course, because this is really the work that he does, even though he produces food, is really so much estranged from the work itself, from the earth, and from like reaching any product. And that's something that computer games really often give you, like an immediate reward for your effort. You can really change something. You can see an effect of what you do. And that, I think this is also something that really people miss in capitalist society, that you have the feeling you're just part of a huge system where your work really doesn't matter. And you also don't really see a reason why you do it. And like, and there the computer game definitely does fill a hole.
Listen, I have to go. I've got a meeting with a grad student. So, but you guys can keep chatting. But really great to meet you guys. Hope to meet in the real world somewhere or in the virtual space. Who knows?
Yeah, we should bring you up to Scotland.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a great moment for us as well. Very decisive. Was great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Likewise.
We hope to see you soon physically as well. Yeah.
Definitely.
A pleasure. See you soon.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, Joseph. Yeah, should we maybe also wrap it up slowly? I mean, I've been finding this a super fascinating conversation. I really would love to figure out some way to have it in person or in some other kind of form up here in Scotland or back over in Austria, where I'm from, of course, as well.
That sounds great.
Are you even all based in Austria? Or are you everywhere?
Not quite, Jona. Where are you currently at? Are you in Germany still, or are you back in Norway?
I'm in Germany right now, but I'm based in Norway, in northern Norway. So yeah, we mainly meet us digitally as well in the team. I mean, like you guys are all in Austria, but I guess.
Exactly.
Well, at the end of the day, it really just matters where the server is located anyway.
Exactly.
So
and how fast the internet connection is.
Territory. It would be difficult to work with someone in Southeast Asia. So, but Europe is all, doesn't really matter where we are actually.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point. A lot of our students are now not coming to campus, but are from Southeast Asia, and they're there, and there's some very challenging collaborative project work for them. Yeah.
Difficult with the time zones and everything, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, as I proved, it's even difficulty for almost in the same time zone because Microsoft just threw a big
with Teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
But it was a pleasure also to get to know you, and you really did it very, very well. Like, we loved all the questions.
Thank you a lot. I hope Mary's question was answered as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was really, thank you so much. It's been so interesting as well to hear about what you do. And it struck a chord with me because recently I've come into games from theatre, so it's a whole new world, and I was making a scene in Unreal, and I'm an artist, not a programmer, so I wanted to be able to walk about this scene, and the only way I could implement that from a basic template was to use a first-person shooter template, so I had to have a gun in my scene. That's the only way you can walk about the scene. I just found that incredible.
It's a wonderful story. It really
Yeah.
fits to it.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
There you have it. That already says everything we need to know about this current society, right? If the only available template in the game engine is that of a first-person shooter setup. All right. let's wrap it up. Thanks so much to Total Refusal for joining us. And thanks for being patient with the tech issue we had. I did record this, so we can have a chat by email afterwards, what we want to do with it, where you want to put it. And then we go from there.
Thank you for following and for the commentaries.
Yes, and follow us at Instagram.
Follow them on Instagram.
Build up a community.
Yes, thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
Hey guys.
Ciao.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.